Welcome to the Expand My Mind podcast, where I speak to creators, entrepreneurs, and experts in their field about concepts and topics that not only intrigue me, but add a sense of purpose and value to everyday life. I'm Vahin, your host in the Expand My Mind podcast, and in this episode of the podcast, I speak to Sam Dakin. Now, underneath his fresh face and disarming smile lies a tenacious, humble, and extremely focused young athlete. Sam Dakin is an Olympic track cyclist who has studied finance and entrepreneurship. As an elite athlete, Sam has overcome mental health challenges to provide incredible talks on resilience, grit, and having a high performance mindset. Now, before we continue with this delightfully inciting podcast episode, my request to you is to please support the podcast by following us on social media or subscribing to us on YouTube and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred podcast streaming platform. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Expand My Mind podcast. Really appreciate your time and your journey that you're going to be sharing with us. It sounds fantastic. All from what I've researched and seen, it's marvelous. It's my first time speaking to an Olympic athlete. I remember back in grade 2, I used to draw Olympic athletes, and ironically, it was a track cyclist that I drew. And I can't seem to find it, but if I do find it, I swear, I think I should share it on the Expand My Mind social media platforms. But Sam,
that's epic. Yeah, thanks for having me.
it's my honor and my pleasure. But Sam, why don't you get us started and just tell us, how did you get to where you are today, this magnificent person that you are?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started off like any other kid. I was born and raised in New Zealand. I was born in Auckland, in the big city, and have pretty much lived in New Zealand my entire life. We did 2.5 years when I was really young. Dad had a job in Australia, and I did my first year of primary school in Sydney, in a small town called Kalara, which I remember pretty clearly. It was very hot. We had to wear shoes because the snakes would have bitten our feet otherwise. And then we moved to New Zealand, man, and I was just always a really sporty kid. I was never overly good at sitting still. I'm still not very good at sitting still. I'm twiddling my thumbs with something behind the camera here. And so I think sport was kind of always going to be in my life some way, shape or form. And like every other Kiwi kid, I wanted to play rugby. I wanted to be an All Black. But, I started to find cycling when I was about 8 years old. I went out mountain biking with my dad, and I just loved the freedom that it gave me and the rush of speed. And I was the only one in control of that bike at any one time. And for me, that was a really kind of empowering bit at a young age, that I had this freedom to go and do it. And I tried mountain biking and road cycling, and I tried heaps of different other sports. I played volleyball and cricket and table tennis and rugby, and tried a few other things as well. And it wasn't until probably the end of high school that I really started to fall in love with cycling, and that's what I wanted to do. And then I realized that probably being an endurance cyclist wasn't for me. I was getting a bit bigger and couldn't go up hills very fast. And I tried track one time with some of my mates, and going 65, 70k an hour under your own steam around a banking that's 43.5 degrees is its steepest angle, and leaning and racing against each other was just something that I just caught the complete buzz of and had a bit of natural talent in it. And that's when I kind of said to myself, I'm going to go to the Olympics one day, and I want to see how far I can take this thing. So I packed up my car and everything I had, moved down to Waikato in 2015 to study at university there and live at the halls and the velodromes over in Cambridge, which was only 20 minutes away, and just chase the dream, really. Been a hell of a roller coaster of a ride. Lots of different stories, which I'm sure we'll get stuck into today. And it's all culminated into kind of living the dream I am today, founding a business, being an Olympian, and just living a pretty amazing life, really, which is, fortunately brought us to have this conversation today, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And Sam, you spoke about playing sports, all these different sports, taking part in them, participating or playing them. How did you actually balance it, your academics and your sports? Like, I know sports in South Africa, for example, it's like, if you don't go to a sports school, it's like kind of academics full way. How did you balance it? I don't know how New Zealand works, so why don't you give us a little bit of a expand mind?
For sure, yeah. I think I've always fortunately had a natural kind of ability to time manage really well. I'm not a perfectionist. Like I don't need to get things done to the nth degree for me to be satisfied with them. I have a perfectionist tendency, but I wouldn't say I do everything to the detail. So I think a large part of how I managed it was that when I was doing something, I was all in. I did it the best I could, but then I moved on to the next thing, and then I moved on to the next thing. So I was really careful with the amount of time I allotted to things. So when I had time to do schoolwork or academic work, I had an hour. I did as much as I could in an hour, and then I moved on. And I found for me that just worked really well. That I could get, the old saying goes, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I was kind of that's how I operated. If you gave me a lot of time, I actually didn't get a lot done. I function better when I have a lot going on, and I like juggling a lot of balls, and I always have from a really young age, and that's how I operated throughout high school as well. And I think being active actually gave me the ability to sit down and do those things. It was kind of that release of that dopamine and that serotonin that made me want to study or to learn more. And if I didn't do that, I was a bit cranky. I just wasn't overly productive. So for me, it was about time management. It was about being in when I'm in and out when I'm out, and just being careful with the time I had.
Yeah. And speaking of time management, like, how did school, at school, like, I don't know if you like had extracurricular clubs where you had to do private clubs and so forth. But how did you actually have what is your teacher's impressions of you during your school hours and so forth? Were you like should I say, a teacher's pet, or were you like the teacher's most disliked student, or you're just like the average student?
Sure. I would say my peers would have described me as a teacher's pet for sure. And I think in New Zealand, we're really guilty of tall poppy syndrome. And if someone tries, it's not really that cool. And I was probably the kid that tried really hard at a lot of things, because I saw the potential in them, and I kind of didn't really enjoy doing something if I wasn't going to make something of it, because I just felt like that was a waste of time. So yeah, I was very much a teacher's pet, but I also had a bit of a disruptive side to me, or a bit of an anger switch throughout my youth, and I've still got that anger in me. It's just bottled all the way down, and it takes a lot to boil it up now. But when I was younger, I couldn't control it, and I'd just snap. I'd just lose the plot in the middle of class, or do something really dumb or silly, or at home it was smashing windows or throwing a cricket bat at my brother, or I'd see red, and I couldn't control it at a young age, and it was quite scary, growing up through that. And my parents were amazing. They just put trust, I guess, in their parenting, that I would understand that and grow out of it, and I did. And it's still there, but I know how to control those parts. So whilst I was a self-described teacher's pet at high school, I still had a kind of imperfect side to me throughout that time as well.
Controlling your anger and so forth. How did you actually start managing the anger? Where did the anger management start come from? Did it come personally, or did you like start seeking help from people? Was there some tactics or tools that you just mentally started performing?
Yeah. I think it was probably much more of an organic kind of understanding as I grew up and matured more than anything. I think as I got older, I understood the consequences of what kind of that anger was showing. I'll take the example of throwing something at my brother. I could visibly see that hurt him, and that was extremely unnecessary just because I was losing a game of backyard cricket. So you start to actually understand the effects that you're having on people. And once I could do that, it gave me a bit more of a reason to control it. And it was just a matter of, honestly, man, just taking a deep breath, gaining a little bit of perspective. Because when you are angry and you want to act, you just see red and you see fire. You've kind of got to bring yourself back to the thinking and rational stage, and breathing is the best and most simple way to do that. And it's an exercise. Breathing is what's got me through a lot of really tough times. It's something I still do on the start line now, as I breathe and I visualize what they call blue brain and red brain. So blue brain being the cool, calm, collected side, you're decisive, but you're clear thinking, you understand your situation, you know what's going on. The red is the flames, the anger, the hypeness that you have in sport. And I always I always want a little bit of that. Our sport's aggressive. It's manly. It's fast. It's aggressive. And I put that, visualize having a little bit of that, but with a really clear brain. And when you can mix the two together, that's when you get a really powerful performance. So anger and fury has a place. It has a place in a person in sport, but it's just learning how to channel that and use it at the right time.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think that we can also think about it in the same academic field. Like I'm not much of a sports player. I'm more of a gymmer and so forth. I used to play golf, but golf is nowhere in comparison to cycling or anything like that. So, how do you actually channel that anger or that frustration or that, should I say, vent out? So I know that for me personally, going to the gym and after a long day, frustrating day, or anything like that happens for me, I can probably bench something up 80 kilos straight up, and that's just like venting out. It's better to take it out like that.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
take out
For
that
sure.
how do you vent basically?
Um, quite a few different ways, and it's matured as I've got older. I used to punch a pillow. That's what my mum used to go and tell me to do, because that hurt no one, but it got out the same effect. Um, these days, there's probably two or three things I do. If I'm having a really bad time, just screaming as loud as you possibly can in the car where no one can hear you is a really great way to just like actually get the frustration out of your body. And it's a really weird thing to do, but also quite empowering at the same time. I love music. I listen to a lot of music. I pretty much have it playing all the time. So that's a big one for me. Just sing, put some music on, sing in the car. I don't know, dance around the room, look like a fool, or go for a walk. Are probably the two or three things I would use these days when I'm really, really frustrated and really angry. That's what I'll go and do, because you have to process it and you have to deal with it. It's ridiculous to say, nah, just go away, because clearly what you're angry or frustrated about is pretty big. And as you get older, it gets harder and harder to make you really angry. And particularly for me now, I'm much more calm in my demeanor, that when I'm getting really angry and frustrated, there's a lot of boiled up stuff. And the one scream might not be enough. It might be a scream, a walk, and then listen to some music. Or, if it's stuff you want to deal with and talk about, it's, actually reaching out to a mate and going, hey, bro, do you want to grab a beer tonight, or go and get a coffee, or do you want to go for a walk? I think we should normalize men walking a lot more. I'm guilty of going down the street and you see a bloke out for a walk. You think that's a bit weird, or I can't think of the last time I saw two men out walking together having a talk. But it's a great way to connect and share some thoughts, and I think that's a big one for me.
You say you walk around with friends and so forth, but I can't actually relate to the friend part. How do you actually find that person where you can talk to? What characteristics do you look for when you want to talk to somebody? Where's the trust coming from? What is it that person has to uniquely outline for you to be able to talk to them?
I think I've always been fortunate that I've been surrounded by friends that I just felt like I could talk about that stuff with, and I think that's as a result of how mum and dad raised us. And I always had a father that wasn't a traditional Kiwi bloke always, and he showed his emotions and you could see his feelings, and same with mum. So I think for me the trust actually came from within, that almost I was just going to tell this person what I needed to get out, because I just needed to get it out to someone. And what you find is even the people that are the most reserved and you think won't give you much back, when you're really vulnerable and show yourself to them, the natural human interaction is to listen and to do the same. I've had very few times where it's been, if any, where it's been kind of poorly received. But I think it's important that you know the person, you've spent time with them, you trust them with what you're saying. If it's quite sensitive information and you don't want other people hearing it, I think you've just got to trust yourself and make that judgment call. There's no 1, 2, 3 things that I look for in a person to talk to about. It's just, do I feel comfortable? And if I do, yes, then I'll talk to them. But I'm 25 now. I've got some friends I've had for 10 years now. Or my great mate Callum, I've known him all the way through cycling, and we always talk about this sort of stuff together, and that's just something we do. And you find those people in your life, and I understand that not everyone has that, and there's other mechanisms out there to go and talk to people about this stuff, whether it's helplines or psychologists. And psychologists are a big one. I see a psychologist every week. Every elite athlete now, if they're not seeing a psychologist, there's a performance piece missing. Like it's such a critical part of what we do. And surprisingly enough, I barely ever talk to performance with my performance psychologist. It's about me. It's about life. It's about delving into the deeper issues of you as a person. Because when you get those right, your performance will just fly. Anyways, you're kind of just teetering on the top with those things. But I'll flip it back. What do you do? What do you kind of, if you had to talk to someone, what would you be looking for, and also how would you vent your frustration? I'd be quite interested to know.
When it comes to frustration and anger and that sort of thing, I prefer to be alone because I also have that very short temper where if I lose it, like something will go flying or something like that. And I try to keep it deep down inside me. I've learned very young, at a very young stage that yes, I have a very, very short temper. And for me personally, I still will go and apologize to the person if I've done something. It's like something of my self-consciousness that, okay, I've done something wrong. I need to go back and apologize. So when I look for somebody to talk to, it's normally my mom. My dad, yeah, like you said, that your dad was quite open with his emotions and so forth. Like now, I think like with the Indian parents, especially the dads, like they're very afraid to show emotions, and I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah.
But I've been encouraged to show emotions in whatever I do, whether it's I get a really bad grade, I'm really not happy with it. Come home, talk to my mom, and I'll probably like vent out, or I'll even like. I remember back in grade 8, I think I'd lost an award for some godly or odd reason. I actually don't remember, but I do remember coming home and crying. And when I look for that somebody, I think one of the characteristics that I look for is, are they going to be able to share that same, are they going to be able to share with me the same things that I'm sharing with them? Will they come to me if they ever need a hand out, like somebody just a shoulder to lean on, basically? I just want, I actually explicitly asked them, will you come to me if you have any problems like this? I don't want to like be a burden on your shoulder when you're not going to be a burden on mine. So it's like kind of reciprocating in both ways. Like I'm going to be there for you. You need to be there for me. It's like this works a two-way street. So that's like one of the things that I look for.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting to hear different perspectives, right? Because everyone's different, everyone deals with it differently, and I think that's the big thing is people need to figure out what works for you.
And I think like one of the from what I've summed up thus far, it is that you've had a good friend circle, you've had a good support system, which are your parents, your brother, you've had all of that type of things. So what's the motivation besides those factors like your friends, your family? What motivated you to become a sports person or an athlete?
I just always wanted to be the best, really, to be honest. I always liked winning. I'm a very competitive person, anything I do. And I saw an opportunity and believed that I could get to the top of the world in this particular sport. And I'm relentless about it. I still haven't got there. I might never get there. But that's what gets me out of bed every day. And I just genuinely love what I do. I love that I get up and I go to the gym, and like I've got gym tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and I'm excited. I haven't trained in 2 days. I'm genuinely excited to turn up there and just do that. And that keeps me motivated every day. And when I start to lose that, that's probably when it's time to shut up shop. But for the meantime, I just want to become the best athlete I can be, which I truly believe is to be the best in the world at some point in my career. And I know my family and my friends would be proud of me if I quit today and I went and did something else. So, it's not, they're a part of my journey, but they will be proud of me regardless. So to say I just do it for them would be a lie. That wouldn't be true. I do it very much for myself. It's a very selfish endeavor and journey, sport is. And, I'm the one that has to get up every day. I'm the one that has to suffer. I'm the one that goes to bed at night with the loss, and but when I win, you want that good support network there and those friends, because you want to celebrate it with them, because they've ridden the wave with you. They've been so a part of it. Particularly my family, my brother, my sister, mum, dad. Like they've seen it all. They've seen the angry Sam, the really happy one, the one in between, the one that's struggling, and when it all comes together and you get to go out for dinner with them and celebrate, it's unbeatable. And I dream about that night that we get to do that when I'm wearing rainbow stripes or an Olympic gold medal around my neck, and it's those type of visions that get me out of bed on the hard days and keep me motivated.
And speaking about that, you kind of had that when you started off the start of saying that you like winning. It's like starting like Harvey Specter just speaking there 101. It's like I only win. My game is here, and everybody else is here. And I think I paraphrased that, but yeah, it'd be interesting to know what sacrifices did you make? Did you find hardest to make your career in sports, basically?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The word sacrifice, because I've always looked at it as a choice. Like, you give away some stuff, but I actively decided that I wasn't going to do this because I was going to get something else I felt was better. But there is times, like I look at university, and I first year I lived the uni life. I loved it. It wasn't conducive to sport, but I felt that was all I needed. As personally for me, I didn't need 4 years of partying and alcohol and all that stuff. I just felt that I got it, and I had a great friend group. I met heaps of people that I'm still friends with now. But that was always hard, watching people go through university. I wasn't at class. I didn't, I graduated kind of by myself. So I missed out on that stuff, which is hard, but at the same time, I still feel like what I've got now was worth kind of missing out on some of those aspects. I got to travel the world and do all this amazing things. And, holidays are a big one. Family holidays, it's really hard to align schedules to get away with the family these days and see them. But on the whole, it's pretty amazing, to be honest. There's not too many things, and I think the way sports shifted now with the balance of mental health, well-being, and performance, we're seeing a much more balanced, holistic approach to how we do sport and how we live our lives. So it's not you need to be focused 100% all the time. If you do anything else, you'll fail. It's much more, hey, when you're at training and in competition, you're in, but when you're out of it, you actually need to switch off and go and do some other stuff. Over the Easter break, I went surfing, and I went for a mountain bike, and I went walking, and I just lived, just be a normal human, and then you actually come back really refreshed. So I think the way we're doing sport now is a lot more healthy and conducive to be able to do it for a long time, and you will hopefully leave sport a much kind of happier person. But for me, the biggest and hardest sacrifices would have been those key moments with friends or family that I may have missed because I've been away at a competition or had a big training day, and those are the hard ones. But I definitely don't lose sleep at night because I was at peace with the decisions I made in those moments to miss it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Sam, you spoke. Many people that I've spoken, that I've seen on your website and so forth, which are linked down in the description boxes below. They speak about your grit and your resilience. What does resilience mean to you? Because I think many people think that it's just something that we're describing anybody's characteristic. Oh, I'm resilient. What does it mean to you?
It's like to me, it's a fearlessness to just keep going, regardless of what happens. Like, get knocked down time and time again and still get back up. And I think every time I've had a setback, I've flipped it into this exciting moment. If I've had an injury, I've gone, okay, well, this gives me time to work on this area that I haven't had a chance to work on. I'm going to come back stronger. And you're relentlessly positive in a time where you really probably shouldn't be. You kind of, and you paint this picture that you're going to come back stronger and better. And for me, that's what it was always about, is using those times to reassess and to reflect, and then come back in a better place. Because it's not actually often you get forced to slow down and to question and to analyze the small details until something forces you to do it, because otherwise you're so fast moving. So I always took those opportunities those resilience opportunities essentially is what you might frame them as times to get excited about the future again and that reset point. And it was always a great time to go, do I really love this? Do I really want to do it? Yes. And someday it might be a no. I don't know. But they're really important points to keep questioning what you're doing and challenging what you are. So yeah, for me, resilience is just being fearless in the pursuit of greatness, because you will get kicked down time and time again.
No,
It's
I
not going
like
to
that one.
be a
Yeah, I
yeah.
made I made a note here about resilience, how you define it. I've been
Cool,
noting
man.
all of like iconic statements from every podcast guest, and I think that's a really
Nice.
great one on your side. But if you can expand on why is resilience an important skill for an athlete to cultivate?
I think because we deal with it daily, because there's not, I haven't lived the normal life of a 25-year-old, so I'll make some comments on it, but it might not be overly accurate. But you go to university and you have your job, and there's this pretty stable kind of thing happening. You might go get your degree, then you get your graduate job, and then you do that, and then you step up. There's not this. Whereas as an athlete, every day I might not. There's little things that'll go wrong, or I might not lift enough weight, so I'm pushed back there, and then I'm going slow on the track, so it's another challenging day there. I've lost a race on Saturday, but then I've got to go out on Sunday. Like there's this constant reminder that you need to be better, or you're ahead of where you need to be. So, and you always lose a lot more than you win. That's just the reality of sport, and you've got constant measures of that. So if you can't handle essentially the ability to be knocked down, then you're just not going to succeed, because it'll eat away at you and it'll just crush you. And what you see with a lot of athletes is the more they get knocked down, if they don't have that resilience aspect to them, it just becomes harder and harder to come back each time, because they're fearful that they'll get knocked back again. And then, are they going to be able to come back? Will they be able to get to where they were again? Oh no. And it's this panic mode. But when you can have that ability, it's much easier. And kind of what I'd lump into resilience is adaptability at the same time, right? It kind of fits in really well, because when you get knocked down, you have to adapt to the new normal. You kind of have to sideswipe what's just happened. And the Olympics were a prime example. I watched, 25, 30 athletes, all my mates, get told the Olympics has moved a year.
Yeah.
I reckon 3-4 days, people are going, yeah, cool, sweet, it's in a year. No one was losing their mind. Like, yeah, it was tough for people at times, but most of them were just like, yeah, cool, that's the new date, let's get on with it. And that's a pretty amazing thing to do when people have committed their entire lives to an event that's happening on the 1st of August 2020, and all of a sudden someone's like, it's now on the 1st of August 2021, and people have gone, yeah, cool, sweet, reassess, move. And as athletes, we probably don't appreciate how impressive that actually is. But when I've stood back and looked at that and talked to other people about it, that's an unbelievable quality to have. Because when you take that into business or into the real world, kind of nothing's overly stressful when you're able to adapt and work with things on the fly, which is what happens on the sports field, and it's just at a much faster pace.
Yeah.
So when you have this adaptability persona and understanding, and pair that with resilience, you've got this really powerful ability to kind of take any rock or wall that's thrown at them. And if you don't have that in your athletic career, you'll find it really, really hard to achieve. There would be very few people in their career that would have excelled without being able to be resilient or adaptable.
So that you've brought up like quite a few points about reflection in what you said so far, and why do you? From what you're saying, reflection is a big part in what in how you cultivate resilience and so forth. How do you advise to the young generation or the generation to come in, athletes and so forth? How do you advise them to start reflecting on their actions? Like I know in academics, I've spoken about this in other podcast episodes, that reflection is a vital part in whatever you do. But I don't think students or young adults and so forth understand how do they actually start reflecting. Where's the beginning phase? What type of sort of question line do they ask themselves? Where does it begin? And maybe you can expand upon that, Sam.
Yeah, like for me, it's changed heaps over the years. Like currently, I keep a journal, a diary that I write in most days. Some days I forget. Sometimes it's once a week. I kind of really just, I should do it more. But for me, I kind of just write down what's ever in my head, to be honest. There's no super structure to it. Someday I'll list down some thoughts or some key learnings from a race or something that's happening in my life. Like when I was, I battled really bad with OCD for 1.5 to 2 years. I still have it a little bit now, but in the midst of that, in the real grim days of that, it was just a way for me to get everything out of my head onto a piece of paper, and I could see it. And when I could see it, I could reflect on it and understand. So for young people, it doesn't have to be complicated. Get a book. Like everyone's got a phone. Write it down on your phone, on your laptop, anywhere. It's just take some time, whether it's once a week or daily, whatever you feel is best. And there's kind of a couple ways you could do it. You can do it as a reflection on your entire day, what's happened, what was really cool, what was some tough parts of your day. Is there anything you could have improved in class or with your friends? And then just leave it. Don't overthink it too much. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's yours, and no one else has to see it. And that's the cool part. Because when I first started reflecting, I kind of didn't put the honest thoughts down on the page, and I still struggle a little bit at times because I'm always worried that I'm going to have to show it to someone or someone else is going to see it. So keep it really simple and keep it really personable in a way that you're kind of going to understand it. The reflection part's just about learning for the future. It's just about looking at what you've done, the learnings you've had throughout the day, and how can you take those into the next day. It's just about making yourself better. But it's also a great time to look at what great stuff you've done, because we all move so fast at the moment, the world of social media and digital, and how fast everyone's grown up, that we forget to sit back and go, no, what I actually did was pretty awesome today, and I worked really, really hard for it, and write that down and look at it for a second and go, I did achieve that. A prime example was we had some racing over the weekend. It was 3 days back to back to back. And when I was reflecting last night, I was like, I made two or three mistakes out of 24 races, and there would have been 80, 90 odd moments where I had to make decisions in that, and I made 2 or 3 mistakes. And that was something that if I hadn't written down, I wouldn't have picked up on. And that really got me excited. I was like, that's a big shift for me in performance, that I was able to consistently put together every single day near perfect riding and near perfect tactics. So I think sometimes you get nothing from it, and sometimes you gain a whole lot from it. But if you don't give it the chance to reflect, then you won't. So the key thing is to keep it really simple, nothing complicated, and it's yours. Make it yours.
You spoke about pressure as well, and also reflecting back on that point, like during this weekend that you had 3 races, and the pressure and how do we play pressure and resilience play a dual-handed role? And correct me if I'm wrong. How does one be resilient when under pressure? If that's like making sense on your side, Sam.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know if if I have a clear answer for it, so I'll try and describe best I can. I think the pressure is always a perception thing, and we always say that pressure's earned as well. So when you have pressure, it's because you're in a situation that you've put yourself in, which is usually important, and you've worked hard to get there. So first of all, you need to acknowledge that it's actually a great thing to be in, to have pressure. It's really cool, and then you've got to give it perspective. Then you've got to step back and go. There's a famous saying that I can't remember who said it, but it really stuck with me. It was like, what about me? Like, what actually happens if you fail the exam or you don't win? What actually happens? Well, what actually happens when you lose is that someone's watching on the TV and they go, oh, that's not good, and then they turn it off. Is usually what happens. You live with it a lot more than you probably think everyone else does. So when you can step those two things back and understand what the pressure really is, then that dilutes it a little bit and gives you a bit more perspective to the situation. So I would say you first have to deal with the pressure. You have to understand, you have to give it perspective, and then you can start to be resilient within that situation, and you can bounce back from whatever's happened because you're not worried about the outcome of getting back up or what's next and what's after that. You've just got to focus one step at a time. So when you get knocked back, you figure out, okay, well, how do I get the left foot in front of the right, and then the right in front of the left, and then I get walking. Okay, and now I'm moving. Okay, now I can see the play. I've made the play. What's the next play? Is does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does, especially like the part where you showed the dual-handed role, especially as yourself as an athlete. And Sam, like, you've been to university, so you've been through all the movements of academics as well as in sports. How did you actually manage that pressure that came with academics? Because university is not something, especially like what you've studied, which is you've done business and analysis, if I'm right, with a major in finance, and then also a postgraduate diploma in innovation and entrepreneurship. And that comes into how did you actually combine that with your sports? How did you actually manage that pressure that comes from academics? That I think that characteristic in you that says I want to win. That's my number one goal. How did you actually like balance that out?
It's a good question, because it used to be all consuming in the first couple years of university. I wanted to win on the sports field, and I also wanted to win in the classroom. And I think I started to learn that I probably couldn't do both to the same degree. I wasn't naturally a genius or really smart. Like, I'm definitely not stupid, and I had some smarts, but a lot of the results from that came from just doing the hard work. And I found that with sport and fatigue that came with that, there was only a certain amount of energy that I could apply to my studies. So I think after about year 2 or 3 of university, I didn't devolve the pressure entirely from my studies, but I was like, look, it's okay if I'm getting a B or a really low grade sometimes, because I am trying. I'm giving it my all, but something has to give sometimes. And I think once I put myself at ease with the academic side of things, and that I didn't need to be the top student or getting A+ all the time, because I had this other focus in sport, it actually all became a lot easier. I think in turn I actually ended up getting better grades, because taking from sport this don't worry about the outcome, focus on the process, when I actually finally put 2 and 2 together and took that back across to academics, it worked really well, because I wasn't going, I need the A, I need the A+, or I need to be top of the class. It was just, I've got this assignment, or I've got this group thing to do, let's just work through it, and let's see where we get to. So yeah, they kind of went hand in hand, but I had to give at some times, and I definitely did. And then when I got to my postgrad stuff, it was actually just a lot more about enjoying what I was doing. That postgrad cert that I did in entrepreneurship and innovation was one of the coolest university courses I've done, and it was entirely online through Harvard Extension University, but it was a really practical, applicable kind of course to something I wanted to do, which was to found my own business one day and get into that world. And I don't have much interest in doing the traditional kind of 9 to 5 at a big corporate. Like, I want to be starting my own thing, and I think startup culture is really cool. It's fast moving. It's really similar to sport. You've got to hustle. So when I could actually study and learn that, I just got better grades because I enjoyed it, and it was something I wanted to put time into. So I took also what I learned from academics and threw it back into sport. But it goes back to the same thing I learned in high school: just manage your time well, apply and be deliberate with when you're going to do something, and don't be distracted. I'm always a big fan of you always 2 feet in, don't have 1 foot out, because if you can have 2 feet in for an hour, that's much more productive than having 1 foot in for 3 hours.
Yeah, and I find that very, very interesting. You spoke about entrepreneurship and innovation in starting your own business. Sam, why don't you give us an overview of what Podium is? I'll give you the stand here.
For sure, yeah. It's a platform that connects currently New Zealand athletes with employment opportunities, and it was really born out of myself and my good mate and teammate Callum Saunders seeing this this real gap between the skills that athletes had and kind of businesses needing talent. And we wanted to somehow figure out how we could connect the two. And what we were also seeing is that athletes were coming to the end of their career with a couple of degrees like I had, but they never worked a day in their life. So they're 10 years behind the workforce with no experience. They got no one advocating for their skills that they've learned throughout high performance sport, which are actually really applicable directly into the business world. So that's kind of what Podium was formed to do, was to bridge that gap. So we launched in October 2021. We've done 19 placements of athletes. We've also started doing a few speaking engagements, and we've built a really amazing kind of relationship and platform with a lot of different employers. I've lost a vast array of industries.
Yeah.
And we've got athletes working full time that have retired or also still competing, and then we've got athletes that are also still competing but keen to work 20 hours a week to kind of further that understanding of what they want to do for when they leave sport and better prepare them. So I guess that's a pretty brief overview on what Podium does. And we're doing in New Zealand at the moment. We do really want to take it around the world because we think it's a key aspect of that overall holistic picture of the athlete life cycles that you need to gain some job experience, and you get to see and have stuff outside of sport, and that's a big thing to help your mental health, is that when you're having a bad day on the rugby field or in cycling, that you've got this other positive thing to go home to, which is your work or your study or a hobby you've got going.
Yeah. I like what you've done with Podium and so forth. Why don't you just give us like a brief overview of how it started, and how have you scaled it up? You've already had so much of success. You've had 18 placements, as you said. That is quite rapid. Like from October 2021, that's also when I started the Expand Mind. So ironic, which is like a little bit faster. I understand that I'm still in school and so forth, and I have a lot more. I think academics is still. I need to get into university. So why don't you just give us like an overview of how this all started for you? Like, where did the origin of this idea come up for you?
Yeah, so it was actually the origin of the idea came from our former coach, Renee Wolf. So he's an ex-track sprint cyclist. He was Olympic champion in 2004 in Athens, sprint world champion in 2005. He then got into coaching the Dutch team for 8 years before he started coaching us here in New Zealand. And he had a degree in literature science, and he's a really philosophical guy. And when he came to Cambridge, which is quite a small town, it's pretty much made up of retirement people, young families, and high performance athletes. So this Cambridge itself services 50% of New Zealand's Olympic athletes, and he just saw this real divide between local business and athletes was kind of the basis of it. And he had this idea that they should be better connected through multiple different ways. And he kind of came to Callum and I, and he's like, I don't have the time, nor do I really want to do anything with it, but I think you guys could do something pretty cool. We just finished our degrees, and he was a big advocate of people having more than just sport, having stuff outside their sport. So Callum and I kind of put our minds together, and we're like, and we'd kind of heard a little bit about recruitment and what that kind of industry was like, and it made the most sense at that time to essentially build a platform, a beta platform initially, that we were literally just going to have job postings that were athlete friendly. Essentially, they were flexible. The business understood that they would be an athlete. The time frames were a little bit different. So that was the original thing. We called it Athlete Community Link. And when you shorten that, it's ACL was the acronym, which is obviously a common sporting injury that ends people's careers. So we started off really locally with that, and we didn't actually place anyone during that time because that was only like probably a month or 6 weeks. And by the time we got it up and running, I ended up on a call with a guy called Hamish Price through a mutual family friend of ours who worked for a company called Haynes Attract, which was a nationwide recruitment company. And I was just calling him to get some help to kind of understand more about the industry and how one might do it. And he was so intrigued by the idea that he kind of came back to, we went back and forwards, and they wanted to be business partners with us and pump a bit of cash into it and help us scale. So we did a bit of a rebrand and called it Podium, and I've missed a key bit actually, so I'll backtrack. Before I talk to Hamish, we had a piece on the news, on national news here in New Zealand, on TVNZ, so the major broadcaster, about what we were doing, and a guy called Jake Rigger down in Wellington saw it, just a young guy, same age as me, 25, was working in IT recruitment, went to Waikato University, which we didn't know at the time, which was the same place Callum and I went to, and I woke up in the morning and there was a message from this guy, Jake, and he said, "Hey mate, I'm in recruitment in Wellington and saw your thing on the news. It's awesome. I love sport. My parents happen to live in Cambridge. Do you want to grab a coffee when I'm up next?" I said, "Yeah, mate, of course." So Callum and I grabbed a coffee, and he kind of pitched himself to us. Really, he said, "Look, I don't, I've got this job in Wellington, but I'm pretty keen to change it and to move on. And I think this is what I could offer you guys. What do you reckon?" And Callum and I were kind of looking for someone to potentially run it full time, whilst obviously we were competing and we would contribute where we can. And then when Haynes Attract came on board, we had a bit of money so we could fund him, and he came on as a shareholder and a co-founder, and it's just grown from there really. And he's been pivotal to that success. He's been the hustler there every day, getting on the phones, calling people up, and it's just grown from there really. And we've got some really cool ideas on how we can scale it even bigger in the future. I think what we're doing well is building a community and a platform full of high performing businesses and high performing people, and that's going to be an absolute asset in one way, shape or form around the world if we can continue to grow that. And the knowledge that you can share within that community, and it's similar to what Crimson have done on the academic side of things, but sport's a really untapped market for its knowledge, I think, and its talent that businesses can link into. So that's kind of where we're at the moment, and that's the story of where we've got to. So at the moment it's just three 25-year-old men trying to take on the world really, and we're always looking at how we can further expand, but our main objective is to help athletes and to make their careers better, and particularly for when they leave sport, to ensure that they're better prepared.
No, that's brilliant that you're helping. I've often heard, and I've watched some films as well and documentaries of how athletes have just been like abandoned after they're done with, like, okay, you're done, you can't
Yep.
do anything. And I see the problem that you're trying to tackle, and it looks like you've been successful thus far, which is amazing, and I wish you all the best on that. But that's one
Very
of
much.
your successes, and it's one of the massive successes. Besides being an Olympic track cyclist, you've have your business. But what would you say is one of your failures? And this ties into resilience. How have you actually? What did you advise to people? On how you've actually bounced back from a failure. So what is your failure, your greatest failure, and how have you bounced back from it?
That's a good question. I would say my greatest failure would be the battle I had with my mental health. Like I let that. I didn't talk about it for so long that I just let it completely eat away at me to the point where I hit absolute rock bottom. I was down south with Callum actually, and we were going home in a car, and I just burst out in tears for 15, 20 minutes hysterically, and I was just in absolute pieces. I was depressed, and I hadn't talked about it. I hadn't properly dealt with it, even though I said I had. And I was kind of dishonest with myself to where I was at, and I think for me that really hit home as a massive failure. But it took to that point for me to realize that no, I actually need to go out and fix this. Like I had tried, but I hadn't really tried hard enough. I need to keep talking, and I need to keep on top of things, not just when it's a little bit good, I'm okay. I needed to keep pushing through the uncomfortable conversations. I needed to keep looking for answers. I needed to talk to the psychologist each week until I was genuinely on top of this stuff. And it affected my friends and family. It affected the way I interacted with them and the people around me, and I dragged them down as well. And I'm not saying mental health is a failure. I don't want that to sound at all, because it's not. Like, it affects all of us. But for me personally, when I had talked about it and accepted it, but then kind of let it just keep chewing away at me and back on top of me, I think for me, that was really hard to deal with. That I felt like I'd let myself down. Was a big one. There's been a lot in sport, but it's been more pressure orientated. Like I've let the pressure get the better of me, and I've failed as a result, and I haven't put my best foot forward. And every athlete has these races that I can still remember them now. I close my eyes at night and they pain me, but I just don't think about them because I can't change them. But I can learn from them. So I think, and how did I come back from them? That fearlessness to be better. And with the mental health stuff, it was the fearlessness to live. It was the fearlessness that life was going to be better, that I could get better, that the sun would come up tomorrow, that my life's going to be great. And I was just relentless about it. And that for me has always been my key thing about any challenges. I'm gonna come back and I will be better.
Yeah.
Watch me.
Yeah, I like the way, like, the fearlessness that you're speaking about. But Sam, I think one of the parts, and if you're comfortable with talking about it, it's your mental health, what you went through. I think our audience and myself would like to hear, especially as an athlete, I would think that an athlete has no problems at all. It's one of the biggest myths. It's like thinking that a doctor has no problems at all because they're making money, but money ain't only the revolving factor. It's your mental health that we put into, and that's why the Expand My Mind came alive. Sam, why don't you give us an overview of what happened? You don't have to give us the most intricate details if you're not comfortable, but yeah, we'd just like to hear what exactly happened.
Sure, man. Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to. So for me, it started in 2018. So I was 22 years old. I had that stuff. I had anger issues we talked about, but I'd never really understood what mental issues were. And I woke up one day, and it was June something, 2018. I remember because I was in a place called T-Town in the States where we go to each year, and I just had this thought come into my head that really questioned who I was, and largely it was about my kind of sexuality and stuff like that. And I won't dive too deep into it because it'll just convolute the story. But it started for an hour a day, and it was just this random thought, and I was like, yeah, cool, don't worry. But then this thought started happening 2 hours a day, and then it was 3 hours a day, and it was constantly on repeat. It's kind of the best way to describe it was, imagine everything you believe in, imagine that, and then someone questioning whether you believe in it every single hour of the day, 16 hours a day for 2 years. You start to kind of doubt everything that's happened. And I never understood what it was. I did so much reading, I did so much Googling, and I was honestly just losing the plot because there was just this rotating thought in my head, but I had no answers to it. And because it was an uncomfortable thing to talk about, I never talked about it. I just kind of left it in my head. So that was 2018, and that thought built up to that 16-hour a day point over a year or a year and a half. And it wasn't, I've spoken about this before, and it wasn't until I stumbled across a Reddit feed of all places that I started reading. I was like, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And it was just this instant relief because someone else was dealing with it, and I now had an answer to it, which was OCD, and it was the form of what they call pure OCD. So there's two types of OCD. You have your physical things, which is like you have to turn the light switches off 20 times, or you have to clean the dishwasher, or whatever it is. So that's a physical thing that you're obsessed with that you need to do in order to move on. But the other side is called pure O, which is what I have, which is entirely internal, and it's called the doubting disease as well. So you start to doubt a lot of things, and you question all the stuff, and you just have rolling thoughts on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. So that's what I had to deal with, and it wasn't until I found that I then told my mum, and I was like, this is what's going on. And she was amazing and found me a psychiatrist in Auckland called Jock Matthews that we were at Worlds at the time, and I landed back from Berlin on a Wednesday, and I went and saw him on a Thursday. And for me, that was the real turning point where I could just get all this stuff, this really, really uncomfortable stuff that I didn't want to talk about, out to someone that understood me. And that's kind of where the, I guess, recovery journey started. But it took me 24 odd months before I got to that point to actually talk about it and to deal with it. And it was really hard, really, really hard. It's still tough sometimes, but I understand it now. And for me, that was the biggest part, is that I had an answer to my thoughts. And what it taught me is that if you're thinking it, someone else has thought it, someone else has dealt with it. Like, there's probably no issue in the world that I know of that only one person's ever seen or dealt
Yeah.
with. And I think once I had that perspective, it was much easier.
Yeah, and that's quite. Uh, I think I've been enlightened, and you've given me so much of insight. But you say that you spoke to people, you spoke to your mum, and
Mm,
you spoke to people about it. Do you think speaking is the most important thing when, especially you, it took you 24 months to actually like go
mm.
and go about and confront it and start solving the problem?
Yeah.
How would you advise to people besides the speaking part? Like many people struggle with this here, that they can't
Mm,
speak to somebody because the fear of judging and
mm,
the fear of being. Um, I think like society will just gang up upon them. Um,
mm,
how do you advise to people to do that? Because I think I, I've been open to a lot of things, like being on the podcast. I've been learned from so many people like yourself, Sam, on how to speak to people if I'm having a problem, ask for help.
yeah.
There's no actual bad thing about it. And yes, if people judge you, that's it. But I'd like to hear your view on how can people confront certain issues.
Yeah, I think speaking would be my number one go to on how to deal with it. But like you said, it's not always that simple. Start with writing it down. If it's easy to write it down and then give it to someone, do that. Like when I eventually figured out what I was struggling with, I was so drained from kind of explaining it and I didn't felt I explained it well. So I found a video online, and that's just what I showed to a lot of my friends and my dad. I remember I showed him the video because I felt like that was a better way to explain it. So if you're dealing with something, really specific like OCD or pure OCD, that's something I use. That's something I did. With depression and stuff, I think writing stuff down or writing why you're sad or struggling can be a big one. Or go and do things that you feel will make you better. You might not actually have to talk about what you're struggling with, but you might know that going for a walk in the park with your friend makes you feel better, or going to get a beer with your mate, or listening to some music or a Sunday drive. Like, there's other ways you can deal with it, but ultimately, as scary as it is, talking helps. And often the most uncomfortable thing you feel you should do is usually the right thing to do, because it's scary and it's confronting. But just give yourself 10 seconds of courage, because it's usually the first 2 or 3 sentences that are really hard. And then once you're on your roll, you can get it out. And the big thing to remember, and this advice kind of goes to two people. It goes to the person that's kind of receiving the thoughts from the other person, and also the person themselves, is that whoever you're talking to they don't need to have the answers. They're not there to solve anything. I don't know why as humans it works, but they actually just need to be there to listen and nod their head, and yeah, it's really tough, man. That sounds terrible. I'm really sorry. Do you want to go and get a beer or a coffee, or and I think people get really scared that, oh yeah, but I can't help him. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't have an answer. You don't. They're helping themselves by talking. They're solving it by talking, because it's not till you get it out that it starts to make a lot of sense. And psychologists are amazing as well, and they're amazing at their job, but they can't help you if you don't talk. Um, so ultimately, for me, is figure out a way eventually that you can build up the courage to speak about it. But those kind of other things I mentioned are also good tools to have in there.
Yeah, and I actually like the advice. It's 100% like on par, like of what I've done. I think I remember that I haven't gone through any mental things personally myself. So Sam,
Yeah.
you've enlightened me on that, like I said before. But academics is I think a ruthless game. It's cutting edge. It's just like it's similar to
Totally.
sports, if you can put it that way. And you've been on both sides, so you can kind of like expand upon me and so
Mm,
forth. But
mm,
I think what makes you unique is that you've mastered the concept of growth mindset. where you always bounce back. It falls into resilience, but it also falls into a topic of its own. And as an athlete, can you describe why is it, or highlight why is it important to have a growth mindset?
I think it's critical because sport's always growing and the world's always moving and people are always getting faster. So if you don't grow, you won't be at the top, and if you want to be at the top, you've got to grow. So I think at a simple explanation, that's why you've got to have a growth mindset, because you've got to keep up with other people, because they do. But you've got to have it because you'll start. Everyone's bad before they were good, and in order to get better and better and better, something has to grow. Physically, it's your muscle. Mentally, you've got to get better at performance. As you get better, the competitions get more important, the stakes get higher, there's more people watching, and you have to your mindset has to continue with your physical preparation that's taking place, because if all of a sudden your physical preparation is Olympic level, but you're still back at 15-year-old mental mindset, the two don't stack up, and you're not going to win. You're not going to fulfill your potential. And I think it's also, some people might disagree with this, but I definitely don't want to go through life and just stay in the same place. It doesn't really interest me. I always want to be better. I always want to be challenging myself, because that's where I find fulfillment. And particularly in sport, it's rewarded. And if you don't do it, you will just stay in the same place and you'll get left behind and you won't make the team. That's pretty simple. And then on the other side, in business and academics, it's also similar. If you're not willing to grow the business, if you're not willing to scale it, if you're not looking to where you can be better, well, you're not going to be successful in the market. Someone's going to overtake you. You're going to get left behind, and no one will use your product.
Yeah.
Harsh fact. And the same in academics. You'll stay, if you're in academics, to be competitive and to be at the top of the class and to be world leading in your research or whatever it may be. You've got to keep growing, because the research that was done 10 years ago needs to be developed and grown to the modern day. It needs to change, and people are getting smarter and working more efficiently and coming up with new ideas and technology. So I guess hopefully you see how that kind of aligns over those three different sectors, that the top people and all of those are always looking for areas where they can be better. And they're usually not really good at celebrating the small wins. That's something I try and be better at, but I'm not overly great at. I'm like, okay, cool, I've done that. How do we be better tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah, I think we got like 100% like the same mental attitude at this point right now. And speaking about attitude, that I just brought it up. Do you think attitude and a growth mindset play a big part? Like you spoke about the attitude of like always moving forward, always being better than yourself. Do you think it has a factor in winning and persevering through all the different should I say the situations that you could be in? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think having that, it's a relentless attitude, but it's also a positive attitude as well, that now we can be better, we can be better here, or we can grow here, or we can do this, and you're really positive about what you're doing, and back yourself. You just have some confidence that you are good at what you do, and I think that's a really hard thing to balance as well, because sometimes confidence can come across as arrogance, and that can negatively deter away from what you're trying to do. So it's about riding that fine line between, I'm really good at this, I know how to do it, and I back myself, as opposed to being too big-headed and missing the right decisions because you're so fulfilled in your own ego. So I think that attitude piece, as you said, is a really key foundation to the growth mindset. It's an aspect of that.
Yeah, and you speak about ego, and that it plays a big part in it. You need to know the fine line between confidence and ego. You don't want to be too confident and shows your egotistical side of you. How does one actually identify that? Because I think I need to like learn from that as a learning point for me. Like, where's the point? Where's that breaking point? When do you know?
I can tell you a story of when my breaking point was. I was at high school, so I was head boy in my final year at St. Kitts College, which was an amazing opportunity, and it really finished off school really well for me. I loved school. It was amazing, and being head boy in my final year was super special. But I remember there was a situation in the lunchroom or something. I can't remember the exact details, but I said something, and my mate kind of pulled me aside afterwards, and he said, "Oh, bro, you need to rate it a little bit. You're getting a little bit big headed." And it wasn't until he said that, someone really close to me, someone who I really love and I'm still mates with today and really trust, pulled me aside and said, "Oh, look, mate, pull your head in. You're becoming a bit of an egotistical person." And for me, that was the check at 18 years old to go, "Oh, okay, so that's what the behaviour I've done over the last, that was that reflection piece over the last 6 months. That was too big headed. Okay, cool. I kind of understand where that sits now." And I took that forward, and it's probably not until you get a perspective from someone else that you can really understand if you're being too big headed. But I think you can also see it in your decision making. So what I do, I listened to a really interesting podcast which framed my thinking a couple of years ago with the AT&T CEO on a series called Finding Mastery. And this guy spent 2.5 or 3 years as a CEO of AT&T trying to remove his egos from decisions in the boardroom. So he'd go on and go, "Am I making this decision because I want it, or is it the right thing for the company?" And it took him a long time. It took him 2 or 3 years to get to this point. But he was constantly identifying and reflecting, and he'd make some decisions and go, "Nah, because that made me feel good. That's why I made that decision." So, okay, the ego won that time. I failed. And that was a really practical way of identifying what he did. And I've tried to apply that where I can, and I do it in my own head a lot is, am I making this decision in business because it's going to make me feel good because I've got a little bit more money, and I've come up with the idea, but is it actually the right thing to do in the situation we're in? So it's just that reflection piece is massive. You need to actually question yourself: is it ego or is it the right decision? And but ego, it shouldn't be null. Like, it's important. It drives you. It fuels you. It's who you are. Ego provides confidence, but it's about kind of having this fine control over it, like I talked about before, which takes time. You'll stuff it up. You'll become egotistical. You'll make a bad decision. You'll become a little bit big-headed. But sometimes if someone pulls you aside and goes, you're getting carried away, then you step back.
Yeah, and you're like, your friend group, I must say, it's 100% like you've really surrounded yourself with people that actually encourage you. They make you realize of who you are, and they actually like there to make you better. And this kind of puts into your health and fitness type of thing, your nutritional and your diet and that type of thing. Of how, if you were not surrounded by people that were in the same caliber or athletic type of people that you are, do you think that you would have become an athlete that you are today?
It's a good question. I think I would have, personally. I think I'm just so focused and dedicated that I would have got it done. Has it made it easier? Yeah, a lot easier. Living in a flat with other athletes, you're all cooking the same thing for dinner. You're all kind of looking at the general macros you want to get in, your carb intake, your protein intake, what's happening for the weekend. People understand if if someone's had a massive train day, that the person that's had a quieter one might cook because they've got a little bit more energy. So I think I would have been able to get to the point I'm in today. It might have taken me a little bit longer. I might not have learned as much, but I think I could have got to a similar level. But I do think surrounding myself with people on the daily has helped me squeeze out those extra 1 or 2% that I probably wouldn't have got if I just lived with my uni friends who were going out every Saturday, or and particularly in the last 2 years with COVID, it's been critical, right? Because you've been stuck at home, or people have been bringing COVID back because they're out living their lives, whereas we've tried to avoid it a little bit more because we've had competitions and stuff coming up. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, and Sam, why don't you expand on what a day of training? You brought it up that there's some days that you have some very hard and strenuous training, and there's some days that it's a little bit softer, easier. I don't know if easier is the correct term, but more relaxed type of training. I don't know if that's So why don't you
this could be quite an interesting insight for you. I'll be interested to hear your take after I say it. So, this what I do track sprint cycling is it's ATP CP focused. So it's essentially 0 to 30 second effort is what we train. We're power based athletes. We're more similar to a 100 meter sprinter on a track than we would be, say, a Tour de France cyclist. So we do a lot of gym work and we do a lot of repeated acceleration work on the track for 10 to 20 seconds on a range of different gears and a range of different cadences. So because we're stressing the muscles so much at a high intensity, you don't actually do a lot all the time. So a general week for us is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll do a 1.5 to 2 hour gym session in the morning, and then we'll do a 3 hour track session in the afternoon with there's a series of different efforts we would do. And on the Tuesday, Thursday, we would have an easy road ride or a walk or some form of active recovery. And then on Saturday, we'll have the same. And then on Sunday, we just completely rest. So for sprint cycling, it's actually it's 6 sessions, really hard, really high intensity, recover. Yeah. Hit it hard, recover. Hit it hard, recover for 2 days, hit it hard. And you just accumulate that. So when we have our easy days, they're actually really easy, man. They're super cruisy. But you're really tired, so I don't usually do too much.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to hear that. When you say rest, I think this is very interesting to hear, especially coming from an athlete. What does a rest mean for you? Does that mean, like, do you lay back, watch some Netflix, or is there something that you do differently? Does rest mean the same thing that rest means for me?
So for me, a rest day is like do nothing. That's like a day off, chill on the couch, go out for lunch or something, just do whatever. An active recovery day is when I get on my bike for an hour and I'd move, or I'd go, I've started walking a little bit now just to mix things up, or you just want your body to recover and move and free everything up so it's ready for the next days of training. So that would be the two kind of differentials. And when we're resting, we watch a lot of Netflix. I like playing PlayStation sometimes. I love coffee, so try different coffees or go to cafes or have a look around, or I actually like doing a bit of work in my easy days because it just helps me switch off and do something different, or scroll social media, man. Yeah, like when you rest, the term we've come up with it in the flat is we call it marination. So it's like a good chicken. You just put it in some sauce and chill it out in the fridge, and then it comes out tasting really good. So when you get closer to competition, that's when you turn on what we call the marination station, and then you get the form brewing.
Yeah, that's actually quite a cool way to think about rest. Yeah. You've changed my perspective, Sam.
Yeah, there you go, man.
And you spoke about coffee, and I know that we've had it in previous chat about you just purchased your own coffee roastery, which is very interesting. Tell me more about that. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, man. I mean, my coffee journey, I guess, started like when I was in high school. I just started getting a coffee on the way to school from the BP. It started off with a mocha, which I would, I'm a bit of a coffee snob. I would never touch such a thing now from the BP station. But I just started to love the culture of it, and I moved into a flat in Cambridge when I was first up here that had a coffee machine. I started making some, and then I moved out and I got my own coffee machine for my 21st birthday, and I just loved the process every morning of there was a time to slow down and I could make this thing myself, and then I could drink it, and it was really I really liked that. And then I started getting into the different tastes of the beans, depending on the origin, whether they're Brazilian or Ethiopian or Colombian, and how the flavor profile tastes, and then the different ways you could brew it, whether it was through espresso, which is through high pressure 9-bar pressure, or through pour over filter, which is literally just gravity dropping water through coffee. And I just fell in love with the whole culture of it, and it kind of went hand in hand with cycling. A lot of my friends did it, and you could always go to different places around the world. And then recently I just really wanted to start roasting my own coffee and selling it to my friends, and build a website and package it up. And so the housing market's stupid expensive here at the moment, so I thought, bugger, instead of using that money to buy a house, I'll buy a coffee roaster, because that seems like a heck of a lot of fun. And So hopefully it's getting delivered this week, and then I'll start roasting and selling stuff online, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be a really cool kind of hobby to add on to things outside of cycling and outside of Podium as well.
Yeah, and we please do send through the website. The
Will do,
audience can
man.
check it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
It'll be interesting to hear. And if you're doing international shipping and so forth, then yeah, you definitely got your first client here. There we go.
Awesome.
Big coffee fan as well. Yeah,
Wicked, man.
I like.
How do you drink your coffee?
Well, I'm more of the creamy
That's-
type of person, so I enjoy
mm,
my coffee with lots of milk.
Yeah,
It's just the way that I like it. Or if it's like a very strained day and so, like
yeah,
that, normally like a black coffee, like no sugar, no nothing, is like the
yeah,
most potent form. So I will
yeah,
just gulp it down, and yeah, you can say it for that at least 3 hours. You got me on my full zone before I start
yeah,
wearing it off. It's like my tank is starting to empty, and that's why a BP garage is needed, or Seattle coffee
yeah,
around the corner.
yeah. Totally,
Yeah. And
totally,
how
man.
about yourself, Sam? How do you like your coffee?
Um, you, I have like four. I have like four coffees a day. I usually start it off with. I'll make a flat white after I have breakfast in the morning. So I usually have breakfast first, and then make a coffee. And it's a really good, going back to that reflection piece. It's a really good part of my day that I just use to slow down. I try and put my phone down when I'm having it first thing, and just sit in the corner and reflect on the day gone, and then what I'm kind of up to for the rest of the day. So usually have a flat white, and then I'll make a filter as well before I go to training, and then might make another flat white and another filter, or have an espresso or a long black. Or I honestly like it all. I like exploring kind of the different flavors and recipes that come out from all different types. And I just love pouring latte art, man. So that's why I drink flat whites as well.
No, that's really interesting. And what's your cutoff time for coffee? Because I know, like, okay, so coffee has no effect on
Yeah.
me, especially like I can drink it at 4 o'clock in the evening. I'll
Oh,
probably like go to bed at 10 o'clock, and
lucky
it has
man.
no effect on me.
Yeah.
But after reading Dr. Sam Walker's Why
Yeah.
We Sleep, I don't know if you've read it,
Yeah.
but yeah, I came across like times in which you're like, okay, rather let's stop with the coffee now, and I've
Mm.
started obeying to it. What time do you stop coffee?
About 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
I wouldn't drink, yeah, often after 1 p.m. It normally ends up being about 11:30, 12 o'clock, just because we have track at 1 o'clock. So I usually have a coffee around 11:30 or 12. Because I think it's got a 6 hour half life or something. I can't remember the exact stat
Yeah.
of how it dilutes. So the general thing is none after lunch. Sometimes if I'm really battling or I just really want a coffee, I might have one at 2 p.m. And to be honest, I'm pretty good. I'll sleep happy days, but on average, not after one.
And now I think since we're talking about coffee and it relates to
Yeah, yeah,
nutrition, it's a sort of way like okay, coffee is nutrition for us as people,
yeah.
but when it comes to nutrition and diet and so, that sort of thing, what does your plan look like? Do you have like a dietitian that organizes your plan and like you stick to that plan? Do you ever deter off that plan, and what happens when you do?
Yeah. Do I deter? 100%, man. Yeah, we're people. We're 25-year-old male and females, that live in this flat, and I like chocolate. I got a sweet tooth, so sometimes I have that, or have a burger for takeaways. Do I deter? Yeah, 100%. But it's the consistency that gets you across the line. I think that's the big part. So we've got nutritionists that we work with. They can give you a detailed plan if you want, but a lot of what they encourage us to try and do is have understanding of what you're eating and what macros you need to get in. So we work off at a basic level carbohydrates and protein that we need to get in throughout the day based on the training we have. So on like a really cruisy day, you don't need to eat too much in our sport. It's kind of, that's where you could maybe hit a deficit if you're trying to lose some weight or you're trying to lean up. But then on the days when you have double sessions, you really want to ensure you're fueling really well, get your timings right, that you're eating 2 hours before your session, that you're getting the protein in to recover after the amount of carbohydrates, and you're getting something in before bed, because those are the days where the real gains are to be made. So yeah, sometimes you have a plan down to the number, and sometimes you just need to flow with it and live a little bit. So at the moment, I'll I'll go on a plan as of kind of Thursday to get down to some racing kind of targets we've set up. But sometimes you deter, you know, it's hard. It's you just want to go and get a chocolate bar sometimes, so you go and do it. And I think that was the big thing I realized when we went to the Olympics, is I had this like painted picture that, you know, when I got there, everyone's weighing their thing down to the nth degree and this and that. But, you know, I saw someone that won an Olympic medal the night before having a little bit of ice cream. So maybe I've just ruined the whole sporting world's myths, but we're people, you know.
Now, it's nice to know that you being very honest about like athletes to eat ice cream just before a match or a race or anything like that. It's thank you for being honest about that.
No worries, man.
And I think another similarity between myself and you is that we have a weakness for chocolate, so I can cut out anything. So when I'm going through like my sessions and my gym sessions, and I'm like, okay, I need to lean up or bulk up or anything like that, whatever I'm doing, and whatever plan I'm following through the year and so forth. I think like chocolate is one thing I just put it in part of like, okay, you can eat it. If I see it, my parents just went to Finland recently and they bought this chocolate from there, and I think it's called geisha or something like that. Geisha. Yeah, probably somebody can help me pronounce it. But, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I probably never get it right. Cadbury is like the only one that I probably get right.
Yeah.
But it was like, I think that's my weakness. I can probably finish a bar of chocolate if I don't control myself. Like a bar of chocolate is gone within an hour. It's like no problem. But it's chocolate. I understand the pain. It helps.
Man, that's hard. It's too good. But you do get to the point, like I have, if I really want something, but I'm really trying to hit a goal, like it's not super ideal, but there's ways you can manipulate your diet to ensure your caloric intake's the same at the end of the day, even if you've factored in for that chocolate bar. Like if you're on an easy day, for us as sprinters, it's protein pulsing that's really key. So you can't just have your protein all at the end of the day. You can't just have 200 grams of protein at 6 p.m. You need to kind of trickle it throughout the day and ensure it's pulsing to maintain the muscle mass. But with the carbohydrates, whilst not ideal, you can afford to just backload it at the end of the day. So you could just have a real low carb intake breakfast and lunch, because you've decided that you're going out for dinner and you're going to have a lot more and you're going to have your carbs then. So there's ways that once you understand, you can manipulate to enjoy those little things in life by making some little sacrifices here and there.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to hear, you're well aware that all sorts of foods, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, fats, all of those things have an impact on our behavior, performance, whatever it is. How do you keep yourself on the straight and narrow part of keeping to your meal plan, and especially those days when it's coming close to a competition? How do you where's that mindset going? How do you actually like say, okay, besides the fact that, yes, I got a competition coming up, I need to keep on that there?
I think I've always enjoyed cooking, so I've like found ways to be creative in that, and you can make really flavoursome, like, I don't know what the people's perception on what an athlete might eat, but it's not chicken and rice like a bodybuilder eats. It's not super simple nutrients. Like we're making curries with heaps of spices and really nice food, and you know the caloric intake still matches up. Spices have pretty much nothing in them. You know, they're just a powder. There's pretty much no calories in veggies, so you can beef it up with a salad. Like I just like what we eat. Like it's enjoyable to eat stuff. When you get close to the race day, you're usually so nervous that you don't want to eat, so you're actually doing the opposite, which is force eating. You're just sitting there with like a spoon and you're just trying to like force it down you. Particularly race day morning, you're trying to get up and have 100 grams of carbs and your 30 grams of protein, and you're kind of just bobbled with your head over the bowl, just like licking it like a cat, trying to get it in. So that's the opposite that becomes really hard. And when you train really hard, I find when I train really hard, I'm often not super hungry. And then on the easy days, I'm really hungry. So some days you've just got to force this food down you. And for me, that mindset piece is, now this is part of the job. Today eating is a chore. It's not a luxury. It doesn't feel good, I know, but it's part of fueling the tank. today.
Yeah.
And you lead into competition, like you said, you just have that perspective that this will help me perform on race day, and that's your bigger goal, and that tastes a lot better than maybe that chocolate bar or that bigger bit of meal that you want to have.
Yeah. And finally, before we wrap up, Sam, like we've come to almost to the end
Yes.
of the podcast
Oh, yeah.
session. So I'd like to hear your perspective on sleep. And as an
Mm.
athlete, I'm sure that sleep plays a vital role in your performance, your attitude towards different things whilst
Yeah.
training or during a competition. So
Mm.
whilst you're training, what does your sleep look like? Your sleep pattern, and when it comes to competitions and so forth, what does your sleep pattern look like then, or sleep times look like?
Yeah, my sleeping's pretty consistent year round. Like I've always been go to bed early, rise early. I can't log big hours for whatever reason. So I usually go to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and wake up. You know, on days we have gym at 8 a.m., I get up around 6 just because I like to be moving and fueled by the time I get to the gym. So, but on an easy day, wake up around 7 or 8 a.m. So I'm getting about anywhere between 8 to 10 hours a night, which is pretty much what we need. And then sometimes nap during the day, just 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour if I'm really cooked. But it's vital, and you've got to make time for it. And particularly when you're racing, it's really hard to unwind and fall asleep. So, I've tried meditation in the past to kind of calm yourself down, or read a book, or I find just honestly just watching Friends on Netflix sometimes just flicks your brain off. For me, the big one though is being kind of getting my room at an optimal temperature. I can't sleep very well if it's too hot. I sleep really well if it's cold, and I really like white noise. So I'm a pretty high maintenance sleeper. So I've got like a aircon unit in my room that I just got over summer, and has just been an absolute life changer to my sleep. And I've just been able to sleep all the way through the night. I haven't been waking up. And I can feel that that's directly kind of had a benefit on my performance, because I've been able to recover better, and when you can recover better, you can back up more training days. Yeah.
Yeah, and this comes to a part of, like, that weakness that we have. So some of a lot of us have iPads or our cell
Yeah.
phones that
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
Netflix. And before bed, do you have your iPad or your cell phone next to you, on a bedstand next to you, or do you leave it in front of the room? Because one of my weaknesses is that during a holiday, I take advantage of the fact that I can sit in bed and I can watch Netflix,
Yeah.
although I'll fall asleep on the iPad within like 30 minutes and be like
Yeah.
blaring at midnight, and you wake up.
Yeah.
Uh, and you'd be like watching MacGyver, and I've been watching MacGyver recently, so I was like, wait, what
Yeah.
is happening? And I have to
Yeah.
rewind like 4 episodes back and like trying to
Yeah.
figure out where I am.
Yeah.
But how do you actually arrange
Mm.
that? Like, how do you
Mm.
discipline yourself in order to, like, okay, no phone after this time, no blue light after
Yeah.
this time? How do you actually come across that?
Yeah, I'm probably not super good. I could be a lot better with my phone. Like I'll look at my phone on my screen for as long as I'm in the lounge. Like I don't sit in the lounge with no TV on or phone. But when I come into my bedroom, um, I've my desk where I'm sitting at now is like away from my bed. I just have a wireless charger, so I just put my phone down there and I go to bed. But I think the probably key thing that I do is I just sleep in my bed. Like I don't hang out in my room. I don't lie on my bed and scroll my phone or on my laptop. I have a desk that I do my work at. I have the lounge that I hang out and watch TV. So I think when I get to my bed, my body's like, this is where we sleep. Um, and I think that's the really powerful thing in my routine, is that my brain knows that when I'm in a bed, I sleep, and it instantly kind of gets tired. So I just make sure I put my phone down, I turn my alarm on, and I might read a book for 10 minutes, or I just fall straight asleep. But sometimes on recovery days, I might want to cheat a little bit, so I do lie in bed and watch a little bit of Netflix on my phone. But I kind of see it as a treat, and then I'm quite good at just going, nah, tomorrow's quite an important day. Put your phone down and go to sleep.
Yeah, and yeah, I can relate to a few parts of those parts of your routine, your night
Mm.
routine. Um, During school days, it's like quite different. iPad, all of that moves to the front. It's at least like my room is not that big, although it's 5 meters away from me,
Yeah, yeah,
adequate distance, and all the chargers are in front, so there's no electromagnetic waves near
yeah,
me or anything like that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, there's no my lamp next to my bed is mainly for reading. So if you like try put a blue light there, it distorts the light quite a bit. So it's like
Oh, okay,
actually
cool
hard
then.
to read it. Um, it was actually one of these really cheap lamps that you just like find at like some
Yeah,
random like lamp shop, and yeah,
yeah.
it really works well, and nothing
Interesting.
fancy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me that's the way I see it for school. But on a weekend, or well, weekends are not really a weekend. It's I still work at a pharmacy and so forth, so
Yeah.
weekends are like I come home at eight,
You're a
half past
busy
eight.
man.
I'm like ready to like just jump on the bed. I'm like I'm out.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think for you, like it sounds like you obviously lead this incredibly busy and amazing life for such a young person, but kind of those weekends or those evening times for you in bed, that's your you time, that's your downtime, and I think there's a lot of value in that. And we're not all perfect. We can't all get the perfect sleeping routine. Like it's actually really hard to do. And I think at your age and for the younger people out there, it's okay sometimes to take that time to just lie in bed and have a bit of you time is important as well. So yeah.
yeah. And Sam, your insight has been tops today, which is really great. And we're going to finally head off into the final Expand on Mind traditional rapid fire questions. And the first question goes to you. It's who are the most influential people in your life, and how have they impacted you?
My mum, my dad. Who's the third one? Can I leave it at two?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll leave it at those. Yeah, those mum and dad, and to be honest, just my close family, my brother and sister, have been the most kind of impactful people I've had. And I'll throw Callum Saunders in there, who I've talked about a lot. He's an amazing friend of mine, and he's really prompted a lot of questions and challenged me to look at life a lot of different ways, which I've really valued and really valued him as a friend. So.
Yeah. Um, if you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what would be one piece of advice you would give to yourself?
Chill out a little bit. Don't take everything so seriously. You've got a lot of years ahead of you. Sometimes have that extra beer that you don't think you should have, or just go and hang out with your friends, because one night isn't going to make the difference. Would be the advice I'd give to a younger me.
I can actually, I need to start doing that myself. So
There you go.
you've given me some
That's what
advice.
I'm advising you. Yeah.
Uh, if you could have a cup of coffee, which since you are a coffee type of guy, which historical figure would you want to sit with, or it can even be of somebody that's upcoming if you'd like.
I think Winston Churchill would be that'd be an interesting cup of tea or cup of coffee, something like that. It's hard to pick one because there's so many from that kind of era where the world was evolving and there was so many things changing. Yeah, him or Nelson Mandela would be pretty amazing.
Cool. As second guest on the podcast, I think one of another guest, Dr. Bidrish Vallab, he actually also chose Nelson Mandela as a
Oh,
person.
wicked
So
man.
yeah,
Yeah, I think just an inspirational character, and did unbelievable things, and that would be that'd be interesting to kind of ask him these types of questions, right? Like what was going through your mind when all this was going down.
yeah. South African history, it's filled with
Mm.
that. I think from grade 4 all the way to grade 10, I learned about like what happened during apartheid. Nelson Mandela played a key role. So, if you like to quiz, yeah,
Yeah,
be free to already start.
yeah, yeah.
Um, what is the most important lesson you've learned over your journey thus far?
That the sun will come up tomorrow, probably, is that it will get better, and it'll pass. It'll pass. Yeah.
If you could change one thing in your journey, what would it be?
that piece of advice I gave to my younger self: just chill out a little bit, mate. Just live life a little bit more,
Okay.
because you're a pretty amazing character and you're going to do some cool things, but enjoy it along the way.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
which I'm learning now. My journey's not over. I got many years to live. So I've learned it sooner rather than later. But yeah, that's one
Yeah.
thing I wish I'd known.
Time to relax is important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and that comes to the end of the podcast episode. Thank you so much, Sam.
epic, man.
It's been amazing talking to you. Your insight has really opened my eyes, given me more broader view, taken off the blinkers. Your journey on finding Podium, your athletic track cyclist journey, and so forth. It's just like really amazing, and to see how it relates in some sort of retrospective way to the academic world that I'm in. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives and so forth. And I think our guests are, I think they must be stoked to hear your journey. And yeah, I hope that they've enjoyed it. Any last comments from you, Sam?
No, just thanks so much for having me on, man. It's been a wicked conversation. I think you're an inspirational character in yourself. I mean, the things you're doing at 17 years old, are pretty amazing. But take some time to enjoy it. That would be my parting words. And I think you're doing a really cool thing with this podcast, and it's playing a really key role in this conversation that is mental health.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate the words.
To our listeners out there, thank you for listening. Links that were mentioned during the episode are in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave us a 5-star rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at expandable_mind. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.